I shouldn't have married an old hag like you. Younger women are definitely better. I'm embarrassed to be seen with a woman like you, an old lady. If only I could go back in time, I'd redo my life.
These were the words spoken by my ex-husband, Paul, 10 years ago when we were still married. I am Jennifer, 48 years old. At the age of 33, I married Paul, who was 5 years younger than me. I work as a nurse, and that's where I met Paul, at the hospital. He had just completed his medical internship and was full of questions. Paul would always come to me for advice, and his innocence and reliance on me made me want to support him. Despite the age difference and our different professional roles, I was a nurse, and he was a doctor. We ended up talking every day. Eventually, we started dating naturally. Although I was initially concerned about our age gap, Paul seemed completely unfazed by it, and over time, I stopped worrying too. 2 years into our relationship, we got married. However, after 5 years of marriage, Paul started hurling hurtful remarks at me, saying he should have married a younger woman. At the hospital, he would openly chat and laugh with young nurses, but I chose to turn a blind eye. It was our workplace, after all. But one day, I discovered Paul's infidelity. His affair was with a former patient, someone I had never met due to working in different departments. She was a woman 10 years younger than me.
With an older woman, it's unlikely we'll ever have children. She's already carrying my child.
Wait, what? Paul said this with a laugh, as if his affair was perfectly justified. I couldn't bear to stay with a man like that, so I agreed to a divorce. Naturally, I informed both Paul and his new partner that I would be seeking alimony, which infuriated Paul like a raging fire.
I was married to an old hag like you for 5 years. And you call that alimony? I should be receiving a reward for enduring this. Who would pay for such a thing?
He ranted with more intensity than I had imagined. Despite being the one who cheated, it seemed Paul hadn't considered the possibility of alimony. Even his father contacted me, but he nonchalantly brushed off his son's wrongdoing, saying it's natural for young men to be drawn to younger women. I was appalled by his lack of acknowledgement. Paul adamantly refused to pay any money, so I reluctantly consulted a lawyer. After enduring hurtful remarks during our marriage and facing his infidelity, I couldn't back down silently. The lawyer assured me that seeking alimony was my rightful claim, and I entrusted all subsequent discussions and procedures to their expertise. They say divorce is harder than marriage, and I truly felt that. Thanks to the lawyer, I received the alimony I deserved. We terminated the lease on the apartment we shared, and I started living alone. A silver lining was that Paul changed hospitals. His parting words were,
I'm done with hospitals that have greedy old hags like you.
He had clearly moved on to his affair partner, and I knew their hasty marriage would attract judgment. But Paul had already secured his next job, which impressed me with its foresight. However, whispers about my situation reached me, being abandoned by a younger man due to his infidelity. I felt everyone's judgmental eyes on me. Eventually, the paranoia of constant gossip took a toll on my mental well-being, and I decided to leave the hospital. After a period of aimless drifting, I realized that I loved both work and physical activity. So, I actively searched for a new workplace. Fortunately, a small maternity clinic 2 stations away from my current residence was hiring nurses. I interviewed and was immediately hired. Despite the minimal staff, both doctors and nurses, it felt like a welcoming and comfortable environment for patients. A fellow nurse said,
Jennifer, you are observant, and patients speak highly of you. The director is pleased to have you here.
Thank you. However, the calm days didn't last long. a pregnant woman who was referred from another hospital arrived, and when I heard her name, I thought, what? Her name was the same as Paul's affair partner. Considering the possibility of a common name, I confirmed. Her husband's name was Paul, and he was a doctor. Undoubtedly, he was my ex-husband. She had recently moved nearby, and her previous hospital recommended ours. Meeting her here was beyond unexpected. Now, what should I do? Revealing Paul's affair partner to others felt inappropriate. Days passed, and I remained unable to speak about it. One day, Paul and his wife came for a checkup.
Huh?
Paul widened his eyes when he saw my face. He probably hadn't expected to find me here. Honestly, I didn't want to encounter him again in a place like this.
What are you doing here?
His words made his wife realize who I was.
Wait, is this?
Did you come to this hospital to harass us?
That's not true. I was here first. I had no way of knowing that Paul's new residence was near this hospital. But he completely ignored my explanation and spoke as if I kept appearing wherever they went.
You're stalking us to cause trouble.
Stop saying ridiculous things. Why would I do that?
You're an opportunistic woman who squeezed money out of me because you were dumped due to your age. I have no idea what you're capable of.
He shouted this in the examination room, and everyone around us learned about our relationship. Their judgmental stares made me feel uncomfortable, even though Paul was clearly in the wrong.
I've been scared. Since coming here, I've felt like she is giving me mean looks. What if something happens to the baby?
She intentionally teared up while saying this.
We don't know what she might do, so keep her away from my wife.
With that final blow, the attending physician urged me to leave the examination room. It wasn't that they doubted me, but it was the only way to defuse the situation. I understood that patients took priority. I didn't want to be there either. But I felt utterly miserable. And now that the details of my divorce, which I wanted to keep private, were known, I became increasingly aware of the judgmental glances around me. On top of that, Paul's wife kept coming here and bad-mouthing me. Even though everyone knew I wasn't at fault, she was a patient. Moreover, she was carrying an important pregnancy. Balancing the need to avoid upsetting her and respecting her privacy left everyone speechless. Staying in this environment until her delivery, which was still over 6 months away, seemed unbearable. Despite it being a good workplace, I submitted my resignation to the hospital.
It's unfortunate, but it can't be helped.
The director's expression hinted at relief. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet I wondered why I had to endure such treatment. Exhausted by everything, I couldn't bring myself to search for another hospital job, so I returned to my parents' home. My parents welcomed me without saying much. For a while, I couldn't bring myself to do anything, but I felt guilty just staying at home without contributing. So, I decided to take a part-time job at a nearby supermarket. It was my first time working outside of a hospital, and it felt refreshing, a change of pace. Although I loved being a nurse and found it fulfilling, the weight of responsibility in a workplace where lives were at stake was immense. I never had a day off from being vigilant. Living away from that environment was good for my mental well-being. I wanted to avoid burdening my parents, so I tried to manage on my own. Looking back, I wished I had returned home sooner. Around 3 years later, while still living with my parents, I received an offer to become a full-time employee at the supermarket. They recognized my hard work, and I was genuinely happy to accept the position. Then, for years after that, I was approached with a matchmaking proposal.
Would you be interested in meeting someone for an arranged marriage?
Excuse me?
We have a suitable match for you.
The person who brought up the topic was the head of the main store. I was 45 years old at the time and had no intention of remarrying, so I politely declined. However, the manager insisted. The potential partner was also 47 years old, divorced like me, and the reason for their divorce was infidelity, similar to my situation. It seemed to have happened about 20 years ago. Despite my initial refusal, I ended up agreeing to the arranged meeting. Since we were both older, we decided to meet directly without intermediaries. When I arrived at the designated restaurant, matchmaking partner was already there. As I entered the room, he suddenly stood up and knocked over his chair.
Oh!
His face turned bright red. I couldn't help but laugh. It felt like something out of a novel.
I'm Edward. Thank you for coming today.
Nice to meet you. I'm Jennifer. Perhaps due to the initial accident, we quickly became comfortable with each other. I learned that Edward had visited our supermarket during a business trip and had fallen for me at first sight. He had convinced the department manager to arrange this meeting. Interestingly, the department manager turned out to be Edward's senior from university.
I'd like to pursue a serious relationship if possible.
I had come prepared to decline, but I found myself wanting to see him again. After 6 months of dating, we decided to get married. My parents liked Edward's personality, and they were genuinely happy for us. Our life together, filled with Edward's care and consideration, was truly blissful. Since we were both older, we didn't plan to have children from the start. But when I turned 48, my health took an unexpected turn. I wasn't feeling unwell. I was pregnant. I never imagined I'd be pregnant at this age, and I certainly didn't think my discomfort was morning sickness. I suspect Edward felt the same way. When I said, "It looks like pregnant," Edward responded naturally.
That's wonderful. So, who's pregnant? Do I know the person?
I replied, "Yeah, I think you know her very well. She's right in front of you." Edward looked bewildered and stared at my belly.
Huh?
I continued, "I'm the one who's pregnant." He remained silent for a moment. I thought, well, of course he'd react this way. His gaze shifted back to my stomach.
Our baby.
I nodded, and his eyes widened even more. It must have been unexpected, and panic likely filled his mind. I felt the same way.
Wait, so you mean we'll be parents?
Yeah, it seems that way.
Really?
Yes. He exclaimed,
Wow!
a voice I'd never heard before, as he hugged me tightly.
Unbelievable! It's a miracle!
I asked, "Is it okay if I go through with it?" While I had never considered not having the baby, my age was a factor. Thinking about the future made me anxious. Even at the hospital, they asked, "What will you do?" I understood that advanced maternal age carried risks for both mother and child. Not everyone would agree with our decision. People might question how old we'd be when our child turned 20. The uncertainty of parenting at this age also worried me. Still, I couldn't bear the thought of ending a life that had taken root.
What are you saying? Of course it's natural.
His immediate response made me happy. I believed it reflected Edward's genuine feelings. However, after a while, he started worrying about my health. Even for a man like Edward, I could imagine the potential challenges. We discussed it thoroughly, and our desire to have the baby remained unchanged. We began preparations with the doctor's guidance. Both our parents were surprised and concerned, but they were genuinely thrilled. And so, it was decided that I would give birth at a well-equipped, large hospital. The obstetrician was a very caring and competent doctor, which was reassuring. On one of the prenatal checkup days, not only the obstetrician but also an internal medicine doctor came for an extra precaution. Edward was supposed to be there too, but unfortunately, he had urgent work and couldn't make it. So, I entered the examination room alone. To my surprise, there was my ex-husband, Paul. Honestly, encountering him again in such a place felt unbelievable.
Huh? Seriously? You're a 48-year-old pregnant woman? It's impossible to give birth at your age.
He burst out laughing. The obstetrician and the nurse present both had puzzled expressions, but Paul paid no attention. You have no right to say such things.
I'm just concerned. A grandma getting pregnant? It's gross.
Is that how you treat patients? Even without the anxiety that pregnant women already face, spewing such hurtful words is unbelievable. And you call yourself a doctor?
What are you acting all high and mighty for? Besides, this hospital mostly caters to celebrities. Do you even realize that? It'd be better for you to leave before embarrassing yourself.
Doctor!
I'll leave without being told. Giving birth in a hospital where doctors like you work? No way.
Yeah, just go.
Doctor, this lady is the wife of the Taylor Group's significant donor's son's wife, to be precise.
Huh?
You might not know her since you're new here.
This can't be true. But she's my...
We're complete strangers.
Nevertheless, your recent remarks were way out of line. As Mrs. Taylor said, it's hard to believe a doctor would say such things.
Well,
Edward walked in just as Paul turned pale.
Sorry for being late. My wife was...
The tension in the room was palpable. Edward seemed to sense something, observing my angry expression, Paul's pale face, and the overall atmosphere.
What's wrong?
I was told by this doctor, Paul, that it's disgusting to give birth at 48.
What?
Hearing those words, Edward's expression changed instantly. And when I said Paul, he probably realized that this man was my ex-husband Paul. I had told him about my previous marriage, and he knew Paul's name and profession.
You're Paul, right? You insulted my wife?
No, that...
How can you insult a patient like that? What kind of hospital is this? I can't trust this hospital with my precious wife and unborn child.
As Paul finished speaking, the nurse who had left earlier came back with the director.
Mr. Taylor! I heard there was some rudeness, but...
Director.
Director, I thought this was a reliable hospital because my father recommended it, but I didn't know they had a doctor like this. It seems I chose the wrong hospital.
I'm very sorry. No, that's not true. This man is not our doctor.
Huh?
I just fired him.
Director, what are you?
I didn't know he was such a person. I just let him in because a friend asked me to. We don't need a doctor who spits out such insults. He will never appear in front of Mr. Taylor again.
Hey, Director! What are you saying?
Shut up and be quiet. You get out of here right now. Don't ever come near our hospital again.
Hearing the director's words,
No! No! I won't leave! No!
the obstetrician who was there dragged Paul out of the hallway. The director apologized so pitifully that we regained our composure and sat back down. But Edward was still angry and asked,
Did you kick him out because my father donated to this hospital? If not, would you let a doctor like him run wild?
The director shook his head and said no to Edward's words. Actually, Paul had only been at this hospital for a week. Paul's father was the director's classmate, and they had a reunion the other day, and he asked him to hire his son. He had no idea he was such a person, and he looked truly sorry. Not all the doctors at this hospital were like Paul. The obstetrician in charge was a very good doctor. If Paul wasn't there, I would want to give birth here, I said, and Edward agreed. Edward's father was the president of a large company with branches all over the country, and he donated part of his profits to medical and welfare facilities. His mother had been seriously ill when she was young and had been taken care of by this hospital, so he donated a lot of money. That's why his father recommended this hospital for my delivery. A few days later, Paul contacted me and begged me to ask the director to hire him back.
If you ask for him, maybe he'll reconsider.
He had often offended patients with his arrogant attitude and had been hopping from one hospital to another. I couldn't believe he kept making the same mistakes. His father had told him that if he got fired again, he would have no future. But I couldn't help wondering if his father's leniency had made him such a man. Edward was next to me when Paul called. He snatched the phone from me and yelled at Paul, threatening to report him to the police for harassment if he ever contacted me or came near me again. He must have been scared, because he never called again. Sometime later, I stopped by a convenience store on my way back from the hospital and saw Paul working there. Apparently, no hospital would hire him anymore. He was crying his eyes out, saying that his wife and child had left him. But I felt no sympathy for him. I just decided to avoid that convenience store. The following year, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She was so adorable. I vowed to raise her with love and responsibility, no matter what. But Edward was smitten with her from the moment she was born. He seemed to be a very sweet father, so I had to be careful.
How did you like this story? Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.